All right. All right, it's 1:57, folks. I am going to, Debbie, if you want to let folks in, I can start the video.
Hey, oh, hey. Hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Remember me when the sun comes up in the morning sky. There I will be, soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me down the road, hand in hand, you and me. Hi, oh, hey, oh, hey. Hi, oh, hey. Hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh. Hi, oh, hey. Hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh. Hi, oh, hey. Hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Remember me when the sun comes up in the morning sky. There I will be, soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me down the road, hand in hand, you and me. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh.
Hi, in honor of our missing and murdered Indigenous women, we would like to take a moment of silence just to recognize that. So if you would just, just pause for 30 seconds or so. Thanks for that, everybody. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Emily Field is going to go ahead and take us through.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Emily Field. I'm an evaluation specialist at the USET Epidemiology Center. We are building a community of practice. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're joining us from today and whatever else you'd like to share. Please also feel free to use the chat throughout the session. Everyone is going to be muted until the end of the hour when we have a audience feedback portion where you can participate out loud. But in the meantime, feel free to use the chat. And there will be a link to the recording shared within the week. Next slide. We are offering continuing education units today in medical, nursing, and counseling credit. You do have to complete the evaluation form, which I just shared in the chat. I will also share it throughout the hour. You can also get certificates of completion, or if you just want to give us feedback, which we would love to get, please fill out the form. Cardia facilitates us offering these units. You get 1 credit. Next slide. And as I said, in order to get the credit, you have to fill out the form. You also need to attend this hour. If you are not able to finish it but want to watch the recording, you can also get units from watching the recording. And if you have any questions, please contact anyone at USET, and we will pass along your questions to Cardia, or you can contact Cardia directly. And there are no relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies for those involved with the ability to control the content of this activity today. That is all I have. Thank you.
Good morning, afternoon, wherever you're located. Welcome, all my relations. I am Bernice UP Jordan. I am a citizen of the Fort Peck Sioux Nation from Montana. I am a public health program manager for the tribal health program support at USET. I want to welcome you to our 2024 series. Today is actually the first day of our 2024 series, so welcome everybody. Next slide. And to learn and acknowledge what tribal nation land you and your organization are on, please go to this website, nativeland.ca, or you can also text this number and reply with your zip code or city. Next slide. Okay, now I would like to introduce Holly Echohawk. She will go ahead and start with our first presentation of the series, which is the evolution of Native crisis response. And it's all yours, Holly.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Happy New Year. And thanks for joining us. This is the first of our 2024 season. And I wanted to first just say the reason that we selected the video that we showed at the beginning, Fawnwood, very moving, beautiful song and honoring murdered and missing Indigenous women. It's because that song is actually about distress. And we are all in our work encountering or finding ways to help people, to help Native people who are in distress. So today our topic is going to focus on the Tribal 988 programs, and we're really fortunate and honored to have representation from the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board in Oklahoma and the Catawba Nation in South Carolina, who are both be sharing their experiences in their development of their Tribal 988 programs. But first I want to just go through a couple of quick slides with you all. So if you can go to the next slide. So the learning objectives for today is sharing information about and helping you all think about different ways that Native people have capacity to cope. We're going to share some information about the funding for 988 crisis response and the 988 lifelines. We hope that will increase your knowledge of the growth in the country, across Indian country, and tribal crisis response and the tribal 988 lifelines. And I think you'll be interested in hearing about the strategies from both Southern Plains and Catawba Nation on how they have moved forward in building effective partnerships between both tribal and non-tribal 988 systems. So you can go to the next slide, please. And just a reminder, crisis response and crisis care, it's the most fundamental element of mental health support because it's usually immediate and unconditional. Anyone, anywhere, anytime. So you can't get more foundational than that. People, to use the lifelines, you don't have to go to a health clinic. You don't have to, it's anywhere, anytime, any place. And it's real-time access. So it's universal. So the next slide is just a picture of, there's lots of examples of what causes distress. Sometimes it's environmental, like this is a picture of one of the fires in California last year that was horrible, devastating, wiped out some tribal communities who lost not just their homes, but some of their regalia, some of their history, some of their precious objects. But there's other kinds of distress as well. So if you can go to the next slide. There's all kinds of things happening in the world, both in country and worldwide, um, that we all watch and are concerned about. And community crisis, as it builds up, can overwhelm the capacity of a human being's ability to cope. And then the next slide. So the old way that crisis care was addressed before the 988 lines and all of the new approach is it really relied pretty heavily on law enforcement. And sometimes that was great, sometimes that was not, doesn't work out too well. When you're in crisis, as you all know, you're at your most vulnerable state. And in the old days, law enforcement, that wasn't their priority. They weren't trained to be crisis responders and address the emotional status of someone who's in extreme distress. That was the old way. It was pretty heavily unofficially handed over to law enforcement. The other point I want to make is, and remind you all, we talked about this the previous session, is mass trauma. Most crisis response is very individual focused on the individual person in crisis. However, I believe that Native communities really are confronted too often with mass trauma. When there is a crisis in a Native community, it doesn't just affect that individual, as you know, it affects the entire community. And time after time, a series of traumas in community, it really gets into the realm of mass trauma response as opposed to individual trauma response. So just a reminder about that. The next slide. So when tribal communities are in a state of emergency, it can definitely overwhelm the local resources. And you know that many tribal communities have declared an official state of emergency in their community when their local resources are overwhelmed, and that helps them bring in outside resources into their community. Several Native communities across the country are becoming more interested in mass community trauma response. The resources for mass trauma response are found internationally in disaster relief. So that's usually a pretty good source. And in a previous presentation, one of our previous reclaiming sessions, it focused on mass trauma. And in that presentation, we listed in the resources where you could find information about mass trauma from the international disaster relief community. So if we can go to the next slide. SAMHSA, federal government's been really helpful. If you can back up one, I think you need to go forward. There. And that's just a reminder of what I had said before about anyone, anywhere, anytime. But the good news is today's crisis response is community-based, and this is what the funding supports. It's focused on de-escalation, little to none law enforcement involvement, and it's designed to help reduce hospital emergency room use and referring people back to local resources. So it's very different today than it used to be in the former time period where it was basically handed over to law enforcement. Today's crisis response is very focused on de-escalation and little to none law enforcement involvement. So all good news. And then the next slide. We're lucky to have three people today who are going to talk about their 988 funding and what it supports in their communities from the federal government. Then the next slide. Just wanted to acknowledge again, you all might remember we've had previous reclaiming sessions, which you can go back and look at it again in the directory of our former recordings. that Washington State was the first tribal-specific 988 response center. They called it Native and Strong. It still is Native and Strong. It's going forward. It's very active, and we just want to acknowledge our good friends in Washington State that have the Native and Strong 988 system in place. So the next slide, I have the great pleasure of introducing our friends at Catawba Nation and thanking them so much for joining us today. So I'm going to turn it over to Susie Joseph and Erica Pursley from the Catawba Nation, the great Catawba Nation in South Carolina.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Susie Joseph. I am the Behavioral Health Director here at the Catawba Nation. Erica Pursley is also on this call. She is our Behavioral Health Specialist here, and she is also a citizen and a member of the Catawba Nation. Also, Ashley Garris is on the call, and she is our Prevention Manager. I'll happy to go into kind of like the makeup of our Behavioral Health Department here. But I'm going to kind of jump right in to make sure that I get all of the key information, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And also you'll have access to my contact information after if you want to just chat or ask me any further questions. Next slide, please. So the Catawba Nation, the Catawba Indian Reservation is located on the banks of the Issaquah-Catawba River, which is the Catawba River in present-day York County, South Carolina. Our population, I would say, really focuses on the 2,400. I think that number has gone up a bit. In our catchment area, which really focuses on York, Chester, and Lancaster County. And for any of you who are familiar with our area, we are actually right on the North Carolina, South Carolina border. So a lot of our citizens also in our tribal households are in North Carolina, technically, which does cross the state line, but was also a part of the Catawba Indian Reservation. So we're really going to be focusing a lot on our 988 and crisis response. And I want to start this conversation by saying that we are by no means perfect. I think we have found a way to make things work for us for now, but we're of course always looking towards progress and bettering ourselves. And I know that I'm on the presenting end today, but I'd love to hear if you guys have anything on your end or suggestions at the end that are working with ideas that you have. I'd love to hear those because we're always looking to kind of better the services that we are providing. So currently our calls for service, you can think of dispatch, they go through the York County Department of Public Safety. So when you call 911, that is answered within York County. And then the agencies that get dispatched are either the York County Sheriff's Office, the Leslie Volunteer Fire Department, or Piedmont Medical Center, EMS. Piedmont Medical Center is a local hospital here. And so they also have their own EMS ambulance services. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna kind of separate this and like what led us to apply for this grant, what were the needs that we noticed, and how things have gone. I'll tell you our initial goals and then also kind of how we've had to adjust those goals. So initially we did a community survey to kind of assess what the need was. And again, I'm happy to kind of discuss that with anyone after. The entire survey results are not included here. But the Catawba Nation, we are known for our work to rebuild our communities and provide programs and services that reinforce our belief that the mind, body, and spirit are all connected to health and well-being. So while the Catawba Nation did have a lot of programs, we did not have any programs that directly connected us with South Carolina's 24/7 988 Lifeline Crisis Center. And also we did not have the capacity to kind of connect our crisis counselor, local police with any training specific to the Catawba Nation. One thing I do want to mention here is that the Catawba Nation is the only federally recognized tribe in South Carolina, but there are some other state recognized tribes. But as far as federally recognized, we are the only one here in the state of South Carolina at this time. So as with many tribal nations, there is a high poverty rate and also dependence on 911, which really impacts this. So what we did when we applied for this grant is we took a look at what the calls were for the last 2 years, which at the time was 2022, I believe. So we looked from 2019 to present, And at that time, the average wait time was between 20 minutes to an hour. And if you've ever been in a situation where you've had to call for help, or you've actually been with someone that is experiencing an immediate crisis, that is a very long time to wait. And so we kind of figured that this would be a great opportunity to develop additional resources. Next slide, please. So when we applied for the grant, these were some of our initial goals. So initially, we wanted to be fully integrated into the 988 service delivery system 24/7. What we have done is that we have joined the 988 advisory board. We are still wanting to get integrated, but currently in South Carolina, there are two 988 call centers. One of them is located in Greenville, South Carolina, and the other one I believe is in Dorchester. I might be wrong, but I know it's in the southern part of the state. And so while there is not currently funding to create a new call center, what we have been working to do and are continuing to work to do is any calls that come into any of those centers where a caller identifies themselves as being a tribal citizen or as being part of a tribal household. We are wanting for the call center to connect this individual to us and for us to be able to follow up with that individual and provide, whether that is supportive services, connect them to group, connect them just to our local community, connect them to counseling services. That is what we are working to do. So while we will not necessarily be a 988 system, the two facilities in South Carolina, the two call centers, will allow for individuals to be connected to our behavioral health department for follow-up services. Initially, we wanted to provide 100 responders with cultural competent and implicit bias reduction training and suicide prevention training. One of my colleagues and she's also actually on this call, her name is Hillary. We have really been working on developing this training because we've had a few, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call can talk about experiences that they've had or that citizens that they know have had with facilities that maybe were not knowledgeable on Indigenous practices. And so we are really working, since as a tribe, we partner with a lot of agencies and companies and community partners. It was really important to us to be able to provide them with the training so that the work that they do would really be coming from a place of education and also willingness to learn. As we all know, you really cannot become competent in someone else's culture, but at least having that willingness to learn and that willingness to explore and meet the client where they are. And so with this training, we are hoping to have that be something that all new employees go through, and also any company or agency or community partner who is looking to partner with us or who is looking to work with us will at least go through this training. And if any of you would like to kind of talk about that or would like to see that once it's a project that we've completed, we'd love to kind of share that and tell you how we've gone about it. Another one of our initial goals was to develop a Catawba mobile crisis response unit. And what we have done is developed and implemented an internal referral system. One of the big takeaways here with our 988 grant and with our 988 system development has been the creation of the Catawba Nation's police department. So we have their whole model that they are utilizing is a community-based approach. And so one thing that we noticed is that there were a lot of, depending on how the government operates, where you guys are located, but for here, there are a lot of different departments within the tribe. And what we were noticing is that people were aware that citizens or individuals in tribal households were experiencing certain traumas, but that follow-up wasn't there. They really weren't super clear on what services were available. And so we created an internal referral system that will also allow us to track all of the calls. And then internally within the department, what we noticed is that sometimes someone would say, hey, yeah, I spoke to this person. She just seems to be going through a really rough time. So can someone follow up with her? And then there were some other calls, which might be what you think of as more of immediate crisis, where you might be thinking someone really needs help immediately because they are at risk of either harming themselves or anyone else. And so what we have done is create a system to where we kind of differentiate between immediate crisis needs, and then also someone needs to follow up and get them in touch with resources or with counseling. And lastly, something else that was one of our initial goals was that we wanted to increase the number of local partners in the 988 system. And what we have done with that have been to really strengthen our internal MDT, which is our multidisciplinary team, and also develop an MOU with our local hospital, which the biggest, again, hospital in our area is Piedmont Medical Center. And if you go into Charlotte, you're looking at some of those bigger hospital systems. This is definitely, I would say, one of the bigger goals within this grant, because if you have tried to develop an MOU with the hospital, there's a lot of steps to go through, of course. But really building and developing out those relationships. Prior to being in my position, I worked at a local nonprofit that worked with domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse, and a lot of my background is in trauma. So between that and some of the other relationships that members of the department or of our division had, we've really relied on those relationships to strengthen our community partnerships. Again, I really want to focus on our tribal police department, because one thing that we've done and that has been working with us is that when calls come in, they're referred to as calls for service. When those calls come in, they can, if there's anyone that is experiencing any form of crisis, whether it's something that's immediate, of course, they'll handle that. But they also make us aware of it. And if it's someone that they think just needs to be connected to services ranging from substance use or mental health crisis, they connect us and allow us to do our jobs, understanding that our confidentiality has limits. So we will not be, of course, unless the client opts to sign a consent to release, information to them, they just give us the space to work with that client and provide the necessary services. I think a lot of this also has been with our MDT. So for anyone that's not familiar with MDTs, what it does is it really removes the idea of individuals working in a silo. So let's say if victim services is doing something and then behavioral health is doing something, and then the police department, it really removes the need for that client to have to talk to all these different people. We got to all talk to each other and make sure that there are no one's falling through the cracks thinking, oh, I thought this department did it, I thought that person. And it allows for us to really surround our clients and our citizens with the best services possible. And if we need to make sure that we're having follow-ups with them, 988 has been really, truly helpful in the development of that multidisciplinary team. Next slide, please. So a little bit about mobilizing a crisis response. I'm just going to go through and talk a little bit about the services that we have available within our department, and really kind of plugging clients into where and connecting them to where would best serve them with where they are at the time. So of course, we have our 988 crisis calls and the referrals that we receive. We complete assessments, or what some places might call an intake, with anyone who comes to the department. We offer individual therapy, and this is in person and through telehealth. We also offer family therapy, peer support services. Erica, who I mentioned earlier, is a certified peer support. Family therapy, peer support services, peer recovery group, all recovery group, a family support group. We have an internal intensive outpatient program, which meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10:30 to 1:30 p.m. And it utilizes the variety of medicine will teachings, strategies for self-improvement, relapse prevention, family education, and life skills. And also, one of my favorite things about our IOP program is that within the tribe, we have a wellness department as well. And one of the girls on the wellness team is the food sovereignty coordinator. And she, every Friday, cooks a traditional meal for the IOP participants. And again, that is a way that we try to include all a cultural component, in all that we do. Next slide, please. And because of the size of our tribe and also of our department, we do not have the ability to offer certain services internally. And so there's withdrawal management. These are services that we refer out to, but do cover as a department. Once, of course, screenings and proper assessments have been completed. Withdrawal management, which would be, again, detox, residential treatment, partial hospitalization, medication-assisted treatment, sober living / transitional housing, and also working with the VA because some of our clients are, of course, veterans. Next slide, please. We also have cultural liaisons who provide contractual services to the crisis response team and also to the behavioral health department. So they offer things like smudging and other traditional indigenous customs that promote a holistic approach to wellness. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about successes and addressing challenges. One of the things has been I'm actually going to start on the right side, which has been our challenges so that we can end on a positive note. So staffing, when the grant was written, it was actually prior to my being here at the Catawba Nation, but really staffing, and I think almost everyone I've spoken to has had a hard time fully staffing places. And so when the person that was initially hired for this grant was hired in May, but the grant started in January. So trying to really focus as much as we can on this grant while also having to, while also, continuing the duties of their other jobs and other grant funding that we also receive. Um, and also this can be a lot to take on. So wanting to make sure that we're also not burning out our staff has really been a priority. This grant is a 2-year grant. And so one of the things, as I was talking about with the goals that we initially had, I've been wanting, as a department, we wanted to be very mindful of what incorporating this into the services that we were already providing. But of course, with a focus on crisis intervention and crisis response, because it has to be sustainable. So I think every time we talk about grant funding, this is a word, sustainability is a word that oftentimes comes up because you don't want to introduce anything to the community that they become reliant or dependent on, that once the funding is over, you cannot sustain. And so that's why we have been really finding a way to enter this into the systems that we have developed. You saw me mention transitional housing. Again, this seems to be a struggle nationwide, and even more so directly affecting tribal communities, has been housing affordability. The price of living has really drastically increased, which has also made it transitional housing. How long do we provide this service? If they still are unable to afford housing after this, what do we do? And so this is, I think, a much bigger conversation that needs to be had is about housing and the affordability of housing. Awareness, wanting to make sure, I know like the texting, the ability to text 988 also launched last year. I think that was last year. And so wanting to make sure that the community knows, hey, you can call us and we are here, and we'll also, this ties in with the idea of confidentiality, knowing that we will maintain their confidentiality. I think something that I've learned also has been, you have to really do a lot of community engagement and community involvement so that they know about the services offered, and also that they know that we maintain confidentiality. Just because a family member or someone like, who has the best of intention calls, does not mean that we are going to disclose any, protected information. So those have been some of our challenges. And also I would add the reporting aspects. How are we tracking certain things? Has really been, I would say, something that of a challenge that we've had. But we are finding ways to really manage that. Some of our successes, as I mentioned earlier, have been our internal and external community relationships, the development of our MDT. I cannot say enough good things about. It really has allowed us to all work together. And also external community relationships with local partners. And like I said, once Hillary and I get a chance to finish that training, that we will share with all community partners. The development of our internal referral form has really allowed us to better keep track of the services that we are providing and also where the referrals are coming from. And also it has allowed us to provide significantly better case management and expanded access to care. So it's not just stopping at, they make the crisis call, we answer, we talk them down, but we then
Yeah.
follow up. Do you need to be connected with a counselor? Do you need to be connected with case management? Do we need to get you in a health appointment set up for medication management? And with the 988 grant, that is something that we have really been able to focus on.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. Thank you, Susie, for sharing all that information, and really appreciate you and Erica and Ashley. And thanks for giving us a visual image of Catawba Nation on the South Carolina, North Carolina border,
Of course.
and being so forthright and open about some of the challenges that you faced with the 988 work, and which are not uncommon to other tribal 988s around the country. So with that, we're going to transition to Southern Plains, and Mary Kate is with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to her to share information that they are doing in what I always say the great state of Oklahoma as well, because that is where I'm from as well. Mary Kate.
Thank you, Holly. Hi, everybody. Like Holly said, I'm Mary Kate Haug. I am the 988 Tribal Response Program Manager here at the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board. And on this slide, I just have my other two staff, which are peer recovery support specialists that also work on the program. You can go to the next slide. Just to give a little bit of background before I jump into it, I know you all are more familiar with the northeastern tribes in the country, but in terms of Oklahoma and for Southern Plains Tribal Health Board specifically, so there are 39 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma, and Southern Plains serves all of them. Our service area is all of Oklahoma, and then a tribe or two in Kansas and one or two in Texas. So we have a really large service area. Excuse me, in Oklahoma, there are a total of 11 988 tribal response grantees. And of those 11, the other 10 are all actual tribes, tribal entities. We're the only one that is just a tribal nonprofit. So we have a kind of a unique role in that sense. So just generally, our program goals are to increase access to cultural competency training for our 988 Crisis Center support staff. And in Oklahoma, we have one call center. They're called Solari. So if you hear me reference Solari, that's our 988 call center. And then also improve follow-up and referrals by improving integration of that 988 support crisis center staff, tribal nations and tribal organizations, facilitate collaboration between tribal and non-tribal entities, and I'll go into that a little bit more in depth. And then just making sure that we're collaborating with the multiple partners that are part of this project and trying to just increase the landscape for tribal follow-up and referral to care, whether it's crisis care or aftercare. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this is kind of what I was going over before. So obviously, like I said, provide that cultural competency training to partners, and we provide that to Solari as well as another partner called Ride Care that helps us with transportation. Identify and reduce barriers to coordination of crisis care at discharge and follow-up, and also increase access to transportation. A lot of our tribal members and a lot of our tribes in Oklahoma are in rural parts of the state. So transportation is a real issue, whether it's in a crisis situation or just getting to mental health, behavioral health appointments. Increase awareness of 988. Again, we're in Oklahoma City, where there is a decent amount of awareness about 988, but when you get farther out into the rural parts of the state, that awareness goes down. Track referrals and screenings, obviously reduce suicide, and establish tribal and non-tribal partnerships. Next slide, please. So the first thing we did at the beginning of the grant was a needs assessment to try to figure out, okay, what do our tribal nations actually need in this realm? And you can go back one. What are the biggest needs for people, especially out in those rural parts of the state? Next slide, please. So it was a virtual rapid needs assessment. And we had quite a few responses. I think they got a like a small Amazon gift card for participating. And basically what we found from that rapid needs assessment was that A decent amount of respondents had not heard of 988. They weren't aware that Oklahoma had their own call center. And then a huge swath of Native respondents weren't sure whether their tribe provided transportation to behavioral health appointments or clinics, that sort of thing. So all of this information that we got then helped inform our strategic planning process. And I will say that this is a 2-year grant, similar to Catawba Nation, and we just finished our first year, which was kind of our planning year. So all of the responses helped us kind of form an idea of what we were going to do moving forward. Next slide, please. So a lot of our focus has been on outreach and awareness. Just from what we saw from the rapid needs assessment is a lot of people just didn't know about 988 in general, or how they could access it. So you can go to the next slide. So a lot of it has just been about like getting the word out in this year one, especially in this first year. We had to think a lot about how we wanted to help with the like referral and follow-up process. And that took some time to like hash out. So in the meantime, while we were trying to figure that part out, we did a lot of outreach because that's pretty straightforward. We went to a lot of community events, and another part of that is our texting tree. So if you text HOPE to 55251, I believe is the number, then you get added to our texting tree. And so a message goes out every Monday at 10 a.m. And they're related to just different mental health topics. If there's like an event that we want to promote, we can promote the event during the texting tree. If a tribal partner is doing something, we can promote that. We have our tribal public health conference coming up in April. There's a small plug. And we can promote that through the texting tree as well. Next slide, please. So yeah, we go to a lot of community events just to promote 988, to promote our program. This is a couple pictures at different like walks that we've been to, or we have a lot of the other tribal nations that have the 988 grant do all kinds of community events all the time. So we try to have a presence there. And obviously these events are aimed at increasing social connectedness, educating people on 988, and then providing tools and resources about our program as well as other programs in our service area. Next slide, please. So program successes, we've created some really great partnerships lately, but also something that's not on here because it's kind of hard to like put into a slide. But just the work that we've done in terms of trying to connect tribal members to the right resources for them. And the way that we're doing that, and I don't have a slide for this, I'm sorry, but so like I said, it took a lot of time to figure out, okay, so we're not a specific tribe. The other tribal grantees obviously work with Solari to help connect those clients, those callers that call 988 and are members of that specific tribe to provide a handoff from Solari to that specific tribe. So it's kind of straightforward, not necessarily easy, but kind of straightforward. And then they're provided resources from that tribe. And so since we're not an actual tribe and we serve, our service area is all of Oklahoma, we kind of had to come up with a strategy to think, okay, we don't want to just duplicate what the other grantees are doing. And we don't want to step on anyone's toes. So how can we support them while also supporting tribal members that aren't members of those other 10 tribes? So we have a partnership with OK Ride Care, which is a transportation service. And as part of our contract with OK Ride Care is they provide transportation all over the state for tribal members to get to behavioral health, mental health appointments. They also assist with crisis response. And a part of our partnership that is new that kind of just came into being is we got OK Ride Care tablets and hotspots for their drivers, so that when they're transporting tribal members, we have a short kind of questionnaire for them to fill out that says what tribe they're affiliated with, where they're going, if we can provide their contact information to their tribe, what kind of resources they need, if any, if they're interested in services, what are those services? And we get every tribal response. And so if if those riders are members of the other tribes, the 10 other tribes that have a grant, we will refer those riders to the other tribal grantee. And if they're not, then our peers reach out to them and try to find the most appropriate resources for them. And I will say also in Oklahoma, it's complicated sometimes to find the most appropriate or the most convenient resource, because some tribes only provide services to their tribal citizens. Some tribes provide services to any tribal citizen in their jurisdiction, and some tribes provide services to anyone, regardless of citizenship in their jurisdiction. So knowing kind of the ins and outs of what services you're able to access can get complicated kind of fast. So what we're trying to do, especially the peers in my program, which are amazing, trying to like be almost like tribal navigators and like take out the guesswork for people, for trying to find the resource that's most convenient for them. So we're providing follow-ups in that way with ride care. We're also partnering with urgent recovery centers and certified community-based mental health clinics. We're in the process of doing this right now, but creating MOUs and MOAs with those organizations so that if a tribal citizen comes to them in a crisis, then we're creating agreements so that we can possibly get that tribal person's contact information and do the same thing. So upon discharge from that urgent recovery center, we can help them find the most convenient and appropriate resource for them. If they want to go to their tribe, we can do that. If they're not living within their tribal jurisdiction, we can help them find maybe a different tribal resource for them, and just kind of help them navigate the complicated landscape of tribal services in Oklahoma. So we're kind of trying to reach these tribal citizens at different points on the like continuum of care to decrease that drop off after a crisis event. And also just for people, we're also working with a couple other mobile crisis units. So if they go out and they respond to a crisis event and that person doesn't end up going to a local URC or hospital, but they are interested in finding the most appropriate, convenient aftercare resources for them, then they can refer those tribal citizens to us as well. And we can kind of help them navigate just all of the possible resources that might be available to them. So sorry, that was kind of an aside, but that is like kind of a new development in what we've been doing. So we've provided Solari and OK Ride Care with cultural competency training for their employees. Part of our outreach, we created a PSA that is showing in a handful of rural movie theaters in Oklahoma. And we also, we provided much more than 10 plus suicide prevention trainings. But if any partner or tribal entity is interested in suicide prevention training or like Talk Save Lives or mental health first aid, we can provide those trainings whether virtually or in person. Next slide, please. This is a link to our PSA. I don't know if we have time to play that or not.
Yeah, of course we do.
It's just 60
And
seconds.
yeah, and Mary Kate, thank you. This is really interesting. We're going to show the PSA in just a second here, but you really are emphasizing, and our friends at Catawba Nation are, but you in particular, because of the complexity of the number of tribes in California, of how important it is to have knowledge of those individual tribes and those individual tribal systems. And I'm also really impressed with your reliance on the Native peer recovery support specialists. So thank you for all of this. And yes, we definitely have time. We want to share with everyone a view of your PSA. So I think they're going to show it right
Da
now.
na'a ahat hakushu. Talk is good medicine.
Talk is good medicine.
When you call 988, you'll be connected to our local call center, Solari, where you'll speak to a trained behavioral health professional who can assist you in getting the help and resources you need. About 90% of the time, your concerns can be resolved over the phone. If you need more help, Solari will connect you with a mobile crisis team where they will assess and provide support. A crisis looks different for everyone.
Any age, any situation, any day, any time.
For more information, go to 988oklahoma.com.
It's okay to ask for help.
Todos necesitamos ayuda, pero hay que pedirla.
Gadad na tage, awi di shok magoyin.
That's fabulous. Mary Kate, congratulations to you and your team. And I just, what I love about your PSA is in visually and spoken, your reliance on multiple languages, multiple tribal languages and Spanish. And I just think you all did a fantastic job. And thanks so much for sharing all that background. And we do include you all in the resource information. So if people have questions and want to follow up, I think I'm personally interested in the training that both Catawba Nation and you have put together for the non-native providers systems. So I'm sure you'll be getting some follow-up questions from a lot of folks. And I think Livia Davis has joined us from our partners, C4 Innovations. And are you there, Livia? She might be trying to get off mute. Well, what Livia was going to do is ask a question based on what we've heard, but let me do that instead. So I have a question, maybe both, and we don't have very much time, just a few minutes here, but I'm curious both to Mary Kate, you, and our Catawba Nation friends, is during your 988 tribal development process, were there any unique challenges that came up in partnering with the non-native 988 system? Because your tribal entity working with the bigger 988 system, which is mainstream 988 system, I'm just wondering if there were any unique challenges and what advice would you give to other tribal organizations to kind of mitigate those challenges? So do you have any short response to that? And then I'll ask Catawba Nation too. Mary Kate.
I think we're really fortunate in Oklahoma that a lot of the state entities and the crisis continuum of care that's already in place, it actually was a pretty seamless fit. I don't know if that's because Oklahomans because we have 39 federally recognized tribes. I feel like when it comes to public health, it's really common to have tribal partners at the table regardless. So when creating that partnership with Solari, and they also work really closely with the Oklahoma State Department of Health, which has a tribal liaison. Um, it was actually really easy to create that connection.
That's great. Thank you. And yeah, the state of Oklahoma has, because of the complexity and the assets of all the tribal nations in that state, they have a long history of knowing how to develop those relationships and to navigate the multiple tribes. So, Susie or Erica or Ashley, I wonder if you, and I don't want to assume that there would be problems. I'm just asking if there are any unique challenges. So, Susie or Erica or Ashley, do you have a short response to that question?
Of course, because you said short, I'm gonna just kind of like broadly speak, but if
Sure.
anyone wants to hear kind of like the longer tangential answer, let me know. I think the issues have just, so South Carolina as a state is a very rural state. And so what we see is that those issues that we're seeing across the state are even further highlighted here with our citizens and the populations that we serve. So I think it's, like you said, it's issues that really everyone is having, but we are seeing them even further highlighted. We have really leaned on relationship building to bring people to the table and say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. How do we fix it? It's definitely an uphill battle that we are actively working on. But I think a lot of the issues are just what you see with rural areas. So it's even making the services accessible. What does that look like? Okay, you're providing counseling over telehealth, but I don't have internet, right? And so really working on meeting clients where they are and just doing our best to provide as efficient of services as we can.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, so if we can go to the next slide, we try to kind of hurry and get our rest of this finished so we can show you the final video. So the lessons learned, what we're hearing is that the need to provide cultural competency training to non-native entities is super important. I'm really focused on the need for the marketing and information to rural areas, and you both have talked about that. That if you're in the kind of an urban area, you're more familiar with the 988 system. But the further you go out, and we see this in other states as well, when you get into rural, remote areas, which are often the most high need areas, it's not even on their radar. Never heard of 988. Don't know if they did hear about it, if they would trust it. So lots of special needs for rural areas. And then also, you all give great examples of how you have scrutinized the existing 988 crisis response systems and looked for ways to partner. I'm also made a note of the reporting needs, reporting requirements, and needing to troubleshoot that, Susie, as well as housing, even though it's not directly crisis response, but that is such a critical area. So thank you all so much for sharing that information. And again, if you can go to the next slide, please. The resource information, we have the email information for both Mary Kate in Oklahoma and Susie Joseph in Catawba Nation in South Carolina. And also some links to the funding sources at SAMHSA and the California Mobile Crisis Response Example. So I think this goes back over to Bernice for a minute.
Hi. So just a reminder, with any follow-up questions that you may have, just go ahead and email myself, B. Jordan at USET, or Debbie Yanni. Our emails are here, and that's, like Emily said in the beginning and on the chat. There you go, Emily. Please give us feedback to receive those CEU credits. Next slide. Next slide. And as we would like to thank all of you for joining us again to the Reclaiming Native Psychological Brilliance Behavioral Health Echo Series, which today is our first day in our first session. Join us every fourth Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Pacific, 12 Mountain, 1 Central, and 2 Eastern. We have to say that because you guys are from all over the country right now. Next session is in the 2024 series will be held February 27th, the Native Crisis Response Part 2, Escalation and De-escalation and Native Implications. And we would also like to thank our friends from Catawba Nation and the South Plains Tribal Health Board. Next slide.
So we're getting ready to show the video, and I just want to share a little background about what you're going to see. And just to clarify what my friend and colleague Brittany said, this is our first day, but of our third year. January 2024, starting our third year, and this today's session, thank you again to our wonderful guests, is the first session for the 2024 season. So this video is super cool. Hope you can stay on for 5 minutes to hear it. I think it might be a little less than 5 minutes. This is an example of Native Brilliance, a young group of Native young people at a school, and they've never performed, they've never sung, they've never worked together to create a song, but they did all that. They wrote the lyrics to this song, they sang it, they performed and videotaped it, and they did it in 3 days. They started with nothing, and they created what you're going to see. And it's called Home to Me.
Keep the worries that we've always had. It still lives inside. This is a place where we love the land. Let's work to show our pride. Keep us safe, keep us free, like it used to be. Don't wanna be tied down. We find love where we're from and beat against the drums. It's a beautiful sound.
From the ground up, we'll find the path home. Feel pulled by the sun, wish I can go. We learn from the past, now we can grow. We're promised a chance that the plans show. Go big, go far, there are no limits. I wanna see change, so my soul lives it. They cut down the trees while we blow kisses. Defend our home while they dismiss us.
It feels like home to me. It feels like home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say home to me. Don't be afraid when you're falling in fast. There's something in the unknown. I held on to my culture, it's been calling me back. There is a story of hope. Winds of change long ago, hear a chance far and low. Our voices cried out for rain. Then it rained, brought us life, gave us faith, gave us sight. To see that we shall remain.
Let your spirit soar as far as you can. Try not to be reminded by the scars from the past. Rise from the ruins, keep protecting the land. Don't take it for granted, can't neglect what we have. Stand together as a nation, express what we feel. True conversation, address what is real. Connected to the land, we are one with each other. This is our home to discover.
It feels like home to me. It feels like home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me.
Be on point like the fastest arrow. Bring hope to the people of grassy narrows. One piece in the land can't go back to battles. It's fire in action, casting shadows. From old to the new, let us show you the truth. Light up the path, there's a glow in the youth. Boost you to the world, this is where we live. So let the journey begin.
It feels like home to me. 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 Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me.
I love this video. I love the brilliance of these kids, and you can see their shyness, kind of come out as they progress over these 3 days of developing this. And home to me is they're saying that this is our home. It may not look fantastic to anyone on the outside, but it's home to me. And the refrain that they wrote is very much what our guests from Southern Plains and Catawba Nation are doing with their 988 work, is keep us safe, keep us free. So with that, we wish you all a great day. No, we say have a Native Brilliant Day. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you next month.